Okay.
You look bucks. Hey,
I agree with you, Mel.
all right.
What can I say?
Because you're a Galician. That's right.
What can I say? Some of us are from mixed marriages. Litvak and Galiciana. I'm an American.
I was
My
actually
wife is. You were born in this country? Sure I was. Really?
in Detroit, no less.
Aye. Detroit once had a
That
very.
may not be this country.
No. Detroit once had a very.
I was once at, I both knew both sides.
Yeah.
So I got 2 invitations to a wedding from a Yek and a Chassid. The invitations had different times.
I'm sure. I'm
The
sure. I'm not-
Chassid said 6:30 and the Yekis said 8 o'clock. And everybody got there about 10 after 8.
Doesn't surprise me.
But I
Sfardim, by
thought
the
it was
way,
real. I
by the
mean,
way,
it's
in
like,
Israel, the same thing happens with if it's Ashkenaz and Sephardic,
fine.
same thing has to happen. The Ashkenazim will give you one time, the Sephardim will give you another
Well,
Okay.
tell you what,
But that's really a
I
mixed
hate to
marriage.
say it, I always was happy that I grew up in a Galician shul.
Hmm.
There they knew Nusach. The David.
And the Yek is no Nusach too. It's
Yeah,
only the-
yeah.
Talking about the Litvaks.
When
Well,
in
the
fact,
Yekis have a slightly different Nusach for
Sure.
each of the Yom Tov. It's not just like we do one.
right, no,
They have different for Pesach,
yeah,
and they chuckle to a metronome. And when we lived in Washington Heights, it was when things were there.
where did you go to daven?
Well, I went to Breuer.
You did go to
Or
Breuer.
to Mount Sinai, which was also on Bennett. But when I went to Breuer's, there were about 1,100 seats in the shul. There might have been 14 men. And wherever I sat, Unschuldig, you're in my makom kabua. The mathematical odds were, but I always managed to sit in
Yeah.
someone's seat.
Learning sponsors, today's the 28th. Year of learning children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova, Bad Yisrael Dov in her memory, Charlie Galfenstein, Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bad Asher, friends of Nina Moynester, Nechama Asna Bad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecher Nishmat, excuse me, Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka. A month of learning, Rebecca Watansky Lewis and Susan Watansky in memory of Rebecca's uncle and Lewis's brother,
Is that
Pesach
Rebecca?
Pesach Ben Yosef Yehudis. Carol and Josh Sanborn in memory of her mother, Yita Bat Nachman Ben Yamin. Mel and Haran Haller in memory of his brother, Yaakov Ben Avraham. A week of learning, Evelyn and Isaac Blachor in memory of her father, Rav Yeshayahu Yitzchak Ben Rav Yisrael Yechiel Halevi, Judy Iger in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Mordechai. Today we have a day of learning plus Torah fund by Barbara Goldfarb in memory of her husband, Avram Ben Aaron Elimelech. When Hashem was having Aliyah, Crank Rafia Velt Yeshir Hashem Matzliah, Mechol B'nai Israel Good Gebenshtia.
Amen.
Okay. Okay. Okay, just a quick reminder again about tonight. I hope many of you will be able to attend.
What's tonight?
The summer kollel starts. Rabbi Yonah Levin. If you want me to give you his whole bio, his whole CV, I can do that.
What's he doing? What's he
He's-
saying? Talking about?
What is he talking about? The soul. If you have
Nah, I'm
soul.
not interested. I have, my shoes are all worn out.
No, not that kind of soul. Okay, no, he's a very good. You don't get to hear him during the afternoon kollel? You've never gone to hear him in the
I
afternoon
don't
kollel?
think he does.
at
He's not
BRS?
a guy.
He's
Maybe he's a sub, something.
he's well worth hearing.
All right. Back in Elul.
Right. Okay, so I want to touch back on the issue as we come back to our issue of miyun. Okay. I found it interesting because the Gemara is going to bring this up more than once. That as we finished on the top, the bottom of Kaf Yud Beis Amud Beis, right? Umay shna charesh delo ma'aneh de'im kain mimna'e velo nasbe la. That's where we finished, right? Okay,
Oh, my not a katana.
right. So the implication is there's a clear difference here. The Gemara is telling us between the concern that a minor has a time limit for the option of her refusal, right? Because after a certain point, miyan doesn't work for her. Whereas the chereshet, the answer is because there is no time limit for, if she continues to refuse, nobody's going to want to marry her. Okay,
If she has the ability to refuse,
right,
nobody would marry.
right. So that's
Whereas
the
little girl
implication.
is very desirable because you can teach her how you want to.
Whatever.
To be.
Whatever. But the point is, there's a clear difference here. The fact that also once the minor becomes 12 plus, miyun does no longer work. Okay, that's the key. That's why I suggest to some of the commentaries say that with a minor, there's a time limit for the option of refusal, right? So Gemara is going to pick up here and ask the question then. Umay shna katana the achla betruma.
The underlying is that they're both middle.
Okay, so the point being, why is it then, what's the difference if the katana's marriage is a rabbinic standard and the chereshet's marriage is a rabbinic standard? What are the differences? What's the difference here? And yet we say that the katana can, good morning, Bob, that the katana can have truma.
Only middle.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. Umay shna chareshet. And what's the difference with the chareshet? The lo achla betruma. Okay, that she doesn't eat in her. Okay, so if the katana is married to a kohen, the rabbanan, she may eat truma. Okay, that's the point. Right?
Grain, just
truma.
Fruits and vegetables.
Right? Okay. So we're on the third line on Kaf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. D'Tznan. Why? He'id Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, because he once gave testimony. Al Chareshet Shehisia Aviha Shiyotz'a Baget, on the example of a deaf-mute woman who was married off by her father, making it a Torah standard marriage.
Still
We'll see. We'll see. Okay? All right. Okay. Says Shinantem Kashehaitak Tana. That when she was married off, she was a minor then. So that would make it a rabbinic standard.
right,
Okay? She'af al pi shenesiua hem deoraita. That despite the fact that ordinarily it would have been a Torah standard. Okay? Right, that's the point we wanted to bring up, all right? But she was divorced, therefore, for using a get, which meant that they accepted it as a Torah standard. Okay? Va'al ktana bat Yisrael, whereas compared to a minor, the daughter of an Israelite, shenis ate lekohen, that marries a kohen, shol chelet betruma, that she is able to eat truma de rabbanan. Okay? All right. Ve'ilu chareshet lo achla, whereas the deaf-mute woman cannot, right? Gezera shema ya'achil cheresh b'chareshet. The Gemara says, lest the rabbis did a decree, okay, lest it be that a deaf-mute Kohen would feed her the truma. V'licho, and eat it. Okay, katan, right? So the Gemara says, hold on a second. Okay, katan ochel nevelotu. Okay, so that would be a situation. Okay, that this, since she's a minor and she's not chayav in mitzvot, she should be able, right?
Who cares? We don't take
Okay,
the veil
all
over
right,
somebody
so we
that
don't
you
remove it from that situation. She could even eat that. So how can you use that as a example, as an
She's
explanation,
not doing anything.
right? Gezerah shema yachil cheresh bepekachet. So we'll say now it's different, that the rabbis made the decree, lest the Kohen who's a deaf mute, okay, feed it to a competent woman.
Adult.
Okay, v'cheresh bepekachet nami lecho betruma derabanan. Okay, so here we could say that in this case, that with a competent, a deaf mute Kohen, with a regards to a competent woman, he could give her at least truma derabanan.
That's a question mark.
Okay.
Shouldn't he be able?
Gzera dilma ate laochla betruma deoraita. And the reason we again have that prohibition is the rabbis made a decree lest he feed her not simply truma derabanan, but truma deoraita, real, so to speak, truma. Umay shna ktana deitla ketuba. So then what is the difference when we say that this minor has a ketuba? Umay shna chareshet, the litzlei ketuba. And what's the unique or difference about the fact that the chareshet, where it's both actually are marriages derabanan, so how come one has a ketuba and the other one not? Okay, the im kain mim ane velo naspela, because were that to be the case, okay, maybe, all right, and she would use refusal and perhaps no, the im kain mim. Oh, that I'm sorry, you're right. That others would not marry her.
Nobody's gonna
Good,
marry her.
right, because they don't want to pay it. Uktana minalan deidla ketuba,
Why did she-
and right, and how come the minor? On what basis is it that she does receive a ketuba titnan? Why? Because we have a Mishnah the text. Hamam enet, one who refuses, right? Le'erva, what happens? Vahashniya. This is a second example. Okay, shniya la'erva, second degree erva, va'ilonit, and a woman incapable of whatever, sexually incapable of giving birth. Ein lehen ktuba. They do not have a ktuba written for them. Aval yotzeit baget, but nevertheless, they must go out be divorced using a get document.
So the word mamana.
Okay, so hamam enet implies that she does get.
If she isn't mamaye, then
If she does get a ketubah. Okay, uktana yesh la ketubah, and therefore from this we implies that the minor does get a ketubah. V'chareshet minalan delisle ketubah, and the deaf mute woman, on what basis is it that she does not receive a ketubah? Titania, as we're taught as follows: cheresh v'shoteh shenasui pikachot. We have a deaf mute man and a totally incompetent man that were married to a competent woman. Afalpi shenit parkeach echaresh, even though the deaf mute man may somehow, okay, miraculously become competent. All right, he gets his hearing back somehow. V'nishtafa, okay, well, that's today. We're not talking back then, it's different. V'nishtafa hashoteh, or the totally incompetent man becomes sane, okay, right? Ein lahem, okay, linashotehem, right? Alehem klum, their wives do not get anything. Ratzu lekaiman, they choose to maintain them, keep them.
to keep them
Yesh,
married.
right, to keep them married. Yesh lahem ketubah. Then in that case,
They have to
then the
write
wife
it.
would receive a ketubah.
If once
document.
he takes his meds,
Right.
he has to write it.
Okay. In other words, once he becomes mentally competent or a full
Hearing,
participant, full hearing, right.
Or speech.
Right, either way. Okay. All right. So what happens next? Upikeach shenasach hareshet oshota. And let's say we have a competent man that marries a deaf-mute woman or a insane woman. I don't like the word insane, but that's the implication. Afilu katav la meyamana, even if he wrote, okay, that she would get meyamana, okay, ketubata kayemet. In that case, he actually would be writing her a kind of ketubah,
and it would be
a valid ketubah text. Why? Mipnei sheratza lazuk b'nichasav. Why? Because he wants to
give her the money.
reduce or do damage, if you want to put it that way, but I like the better explanation, reduce from his property. Okay? Tama deratza. The reason being because he chooses to. He wants to. Ha lo ratza. But if he chooses not to, ein la. She does not get it. The imkain mim'ane velo nasbe la. Because otherwise, other people would refrain from marrying. Ihachi, if that's the case, says the Gemara, pikachat lecheresh. If a competent woman marries a deaf-mute man, letakem laktubah. Shouldn't in that case then we establish that she should receive a ketubah? The imkain mim'ane v'lo minsabe. Otherwise, it could happen that they would refrain from marrying her. Okay? Right? Yoter mishaish. So the answer is, why might she marry such a man if she ordinarily would not receive a ketubah? The answer is, Yoter mishaish rotzeli say, isha rotzeli hinase. More than a man would like to marry, women have a strong preference that they want to be married. Okay? All right. So we get now to a story. Haru Cheresh, Dahava B'Shavavute de Rav Malchio. There was a certain deaf-mute man that lived in the neighborhood of Rav Malchio. Inasve Itata. Okay, and he
Malchio
he was the one who did the marriage. He was the Masader Kedushin. All right? Okay, he married them to a woman. V'katav la arba mea zuze b'nichse. And Rav Malchio, in the process, wrote a ketubah for the woman of 400 zuz. Okay, all right, right. So why is it that the Gemara mentioned 400? To tell us that normally you would put 200 zuz for the normal ketubah, but why did he choose twice the amount? The Gemara is going to tell us shortly. Okay, right, from his property. All right. Why? Amar Rava, says Rava, man chacham k'Rav Malchio. How smart or intelligent Rav Malchio is, the Gavra Ravahu, because he's really a great man. His thinking was extraordinary and remarkable here. Why? Kasavar. Why? Because he must have been of the perspective. Ilu ratza shifcha l'shamsho. Okay, mi lo zavninim le. If he had simply wanted a servant girl to take care of his household needs, I'll put it that way, to serve him, okay, wouldn't he have purchased one?
Even if it was
okay, Beit Sham, right? So what happens? Okay, Kol Shekain, Hacha, all the more so here, De'ika Tarte. Here he has both a woman to take care of the household needs and a wife to take care of his physical needs. Okay, however we want to define that.
Double dip.
Okay, Amar Rav Chia, says Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel. Following, Eshet Cheresh. Okay, all right, the wife, the relations with the wife of a Cheresh were not known to be married. Okay, that's the situation. Ein chayavin eleha asham talui. If somebody has sexual relations with the wife of a deaf mute, but he does not know that she was married to this deaf mute person, that fellow, is not required to bring in asham talui. Okay, lema misayele. Shall we say then that this supports a view of Shmuel? Okay, namely, okay, chamisha lo yitromu, where we say there are 5 individuals that do not give a truma. V'im tarmu ein trumatan truma. By the way, this was Mishnah Yomi this past week. Okay, this particular text. Okay, that these 5, and even if they did give, all right, it is not a valid truma. Ve'eluhain, and these are as follows: cheresh, a deaf mute; shoteh, one who is totally mentally incompetent; v'katan, a minor; v'hatorem et she'eno shelo, and one who gives a truma that's not from his own property and doesn't have, I would say, the rishus of the owner.
Say in a minute, even
Yeah.
with rishus.
Right? V'oved kochavim shetaram shel Yisrael, and a Gentile who gives truma that belongs from produce that belongs to a Jew. Afilu b'rshut Yisrael, even when, okay, it has to do with the permission of the Jew. Now that may be only to the Oved Kochavim.
Or an off.
Okay,
file.
depends on the Mefarshim.
I understand.
Okay, it
but
depends on the
that's
Mefarshim. Okay, Ein Trumato Truma. His Truma is not valid Truma. Hu de Amar Rabbi Elazar. And he's saying, according to the view of Rabbi Elazar, the Tanya, who teaches as follows: Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Mishum Rabbi Elazar, in the name of Elazar, Trumat Cheresh Lo Teitzei Lechulin Mipnei Shehu Safek. That the truma of a deaf mute does not transact into chulin, okay, because there is,
but it's also not
right, it's not neither one nor the other, because it's questionable, it's doubtful. Isvira Rabbi Elazar Asham Talui Nami Lechaye. If he holds like the view of Rabbi Elazar, out of Safek, then here too, out of Safek, Asham Talui should be brought. The Gemara is telling us he should be obligated. Ba'inen chaticha mishtei chatichot. No, when they talked about the issue of Asham Talui, Shmuel was dealing with the example of the question of 2 different pieces of meat, and one did not know for sure which was problematic. Okay, Umi by Rabbi Elazar chaticha mishtei chatichot. And does Rabbi Elazar really need the same example of doubt as did Shmuel when he refers to the 2 pieces of meat? Vahatanya, aren't we taught as follows? Rabbi Elazar Omer, what does he say? Okay, koi chayavin al chalavo asham talui. That in regards to the animal koi, which is a single case of a single animal, there you would be chayav if one to bring an asham talui if one ate its chalev. So you don't need, Rabbi Elazar doesn't need the issue of 2 pieces. Even one situation is sufficient. Okay, and there could be a doubt, and therefore that's the point that he's making to challenge that. Shmuel Savar Rabbi Elazar Bechada upaliga le bechada. So the Gemara answers, Shmuel is of the same opinion as Rebbe Elazar in one case, namely that of the deaf mute, upaliga le bechada, but he disagrees with him in the other case of the Asham Talui. Okay? Ve'ika da Amri, and there are those who say as follows: Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Shmuel. Chia bar Ashi in the name of Shmuel. Eishet cheresh, okay, chayavina le Asham Talui. That if one were to have relations with the wife of a deaf mute, not knowing that she's married, is obligated to bring an Asham Talui. Meitive, but we challenge this with the following: Chamisha lo yitromu, that there are 5 that don't bring truma. And remember, the cheresh was included among them, right? Savar like Rabbi Elazar, and we say he holds like Rabbi Elazar. Okay, by Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi asks, Ma'itama the Rabbi Elazar, what was his reasoning? Okay, Mifshat Pshita, okay, lay. It must have been obvious, so simple to him, the Chayresh da'ata kalishtahu, that maybe in regards to a deaf mute person, his mind is weak.
But he does have.
However, wait. Umihu, but nevertheless, misfeka le idata tziluta. But it was questionable to him whether the mind of such a person can be clear, can be direct.
Whether he can be functional.
Okay, all right. So we go on now to the next Amud. Right? Oh, or lav da'atat siluta, or if his mind was not clear. In other words, not able to function appropriately. So the Gemara now tells us, Ule olam chada da'atahu, but he could be of a single mind. O Dilma, or perhaps pshita le de da'ate kalishta v'lav da'ata solitahu. Or perhaps it was that his mind was weak, and he did not have a clear mind and able to mentally function properly. Okay? Vahacha hainu tama. And maybe here this is the reasoning. Kevan de itim chalim v'itim shota. But that perhaps at times he was competent, and at other times he was incompetent.
And he can't signal because he can't communicate.
Lamai nafkamina. So what's the difference here? Lahotzi ishto baget, in order to give his wife a bill of divorce. Okay? When he's competent, okay, we could say he could give a divorce. If he's incompetent, okay, at that time, he would not be able to give a divorce document. I amart, if you're going to say, chada da'atahu, he's of a single mindset, in other words, he could function, kikadushin, kach gerushin. Then the same way he's able to marry with competence, he's able to give a divorce with competence. Ve'i amart, itim chalim ve'itim shota. And if you're going to say at times he's competent and at other times he's not competent, kedushe matze mekadesh, it's possible that he's able to have a valid marriage ceremony and marriage. Girushe lo matze megaresh, but a divorce he may not be incompetent enough to do. Mai, what's the answer? Teku. We don't know for sure. Okay. All right. We come back to our Mishnah. Nishtatet v'chule. If she became mentally imbalanced, what's the situation? Okay. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak, Devar Torah shota mitgareshet. According to the Torah, an incompetent woman should be able to be divorced. Midei dahava apikachet bal karcha. Similar to the fact that a competent woman could be divorced against her will. Okay? Umatam amru eina miguresha. And what's the reason that we say that such an incompetent woman cannot be divorced? Shaloyin haguba min hag hefker. That they don't just treat her like a piece
That
of
she shouldn't be
garbage,
taken
taken
of.
advantage of. Hey Chidami, how is that possible? Asks the Gemara. Ilema diyodat lishmor gita. If you're saying that she's able to maintain her get. In other words,
There's enough
in other words,
to know what to
she
do with the
gets
get.
her ketubah,
Right.
okay, and therefore is able to
She
hold
can
on to the
handle
money,
herself.
Right.
okay. V'yodat l'shmor atzma, and she's able to take care of herself physically, okay. Mina haguba min hag hefker, who then would treat her in this
Try to take advantage
hefker
of it.
manner, okay, in an inappropriate manner. Ella de ein yodat l'shmor lo gita velo atzma. But perhaps it's a situation where she is not able to maintain the money she gets for her divorce, or even to take care of herself physically. Okay? Devar Torah shotamit gareshet. Are we saying, therefore, that based on the Torah, she should be able to get a divorce, this incompetent woman? Vaha amar debe Rabbi Yanai. But this was said the following manner in the Academy of Rabbi Yanai. Vinatan biyada. Okay, that you put it in her hand. Okay, implying Misha Yeshla Yad Ligaresh Atzma. Again, implying that she can Lishmor al Atzma, that she can take care of herself, right, in some manner, okay, to allow her to be divorced. Yatztazo she'en la yad legaresh atzma. Thus, this excludes a woman, okay, who cannot understand the necessity to be able to take care of herself. Vatana debe Rabbi Yishmael, and it was taught in the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael, okay, Vishalcha mi beito, and she was sent out of the house. So how do you know at what point does a woman have the mental capacity to understand what's going on? We're citing the part of the pasuk that says she's sent out of the house. Misha mishalcha ve'ena chozeret, one who was sent out and doesn't return. Yatzta zo shemishalcha v'chozeret. That excludes one that when she's sent out, she returns. Okay, so in other words, she has the mental capacity to understand that she cannot return to that domicile. Okay, okay, okay.
No,
So what
there's no
happens?
time.
Right? Lo, no, he says. Tzricha. We needed this to be said. We needed this other explanation as well. Why? Diodat l'shmor gita. That on the one hand we say, okay, which was Rabbi
No, well, they
Yitzchak's
split it.
ruling, right? That she needs to be able to hold on to the money, okay? Ve'ena yodat l'shmor atzma. But if she doesn't know how to take care of herself, the Var Torah shota mitgareshet, the hayodat l'shmor gita. That according to the Torah, this incompetent woman is capable of divorce so long as she is able to maintain the money. Va'amor Rabbanan lo lifka shelo yinhagu ba min hag hefker. But it was the rabbis who say that you cannot divorce her in a situation where so that others won't take advantage of her. Amar Abaye. And Abaye now says, Daikanami, I can deduce this as from the exact language of the text. The Katani, because it teaches Gabe Dida in regards to her, Nishtatet Lo Yatsi, that if she's totally mentally incompetent, you cannot divorce her. V'gabe Dide, but in regards to him, Lo Yatsi Olamit, It says to him that he cannot divorce her ever, whatsoever. Okay, all right. Maish, so the Gemara now asks and continues, Maish nahacha, the katani olami. What is unique or different about the fact that here our Mishnah taught he can never divorce her? Umaish nahatam, and what's unique or different there? The lo katani olami, that it didn't teach that it could never be done. Ela shmamina, but rather we learn from this ha deoraita, okay, ha the rabbanan, that in the one case, okay, the shota is not given the divorce, right, and therefore she can never be divorced. Whereas in the other case, okay, all right, it's a deaf man, all right, and that's the rabbanan.
And if he does, it's called.
That's right. It does hold. If it's a rabbanan situation, the rabbis will let
let
the divorce go through.
Right, in the beginning she was normal, then she went insane, that she ended it.
Right. Okay.
Well, unless you can sane her up.
Okay.
The word insane is wrong to use.
Well, different translations have different explanations. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri, okay, gave a statement, and now Ibailo. So they asked, right? He asked them, Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri, Ish pshitale, okay, v'isha k'mabayale. It would have, okay, right? So, question is, to whom are we addressing this issue? Okay, do we say that vis-a-vis a man, it's easily understandable, but vis-a-vis a woman, it's problematic? O Dilma, or perhaps Isha Shitale, regarding the woman, it's easily understood. Okay, Vaish Kimabayale, and for the man, it's problematic. Tashma, listen to the following Braita. Midika Amrule, since they said to him, Eino domeh ha'ish hamigaresh le'isha hamitgareshet. There is no comparison between the man who, I'm going to say, gives the divorce versus the woman who becomes divorced. Shaha'isha yotzet lirtzona v'shelo lirtzona. That a woman may leave the marriage, whether willingly or unwillingly. Va'ish eino motzi ela lirtzono. But the man does not divorce except regarding his will, his intent. Shmamina, we would learn from this, ish, and here the ish refers to the cheresh, the deaf man. That's important to keep in mind because the Gemara doesn't say it, okay? Kimabayele, that's where it's problematic. Adrabah, says the Gemara. Hold on a second, just the opposite. Midika amarle, afzo. But since our Mishnah said, even this, kiyotse ba, as with her, shmamina isha kimabayele. This helps understand that with the deaf mute woman, the problem exists. Ela Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri ledivreihem. But rather we're saying here that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was answering them according to their line of reasoning. Okay? Was talking to them according to their line of reasoning. Ka'amar laho, as he was saying to them. Lididi, according to my view, ki hechi deish lo matze megaresh isha, in a situation, okay, where the man would not,
just like the man
would not necessarily
cannot lo motzi megarish
Lo motzi.
cannot divorce a
If
woman.
he's a cherish, he can't divorce
okay,
her.
all right, let's hold on a second. Just as the man is, I'm going to say, not able,
Right.
all right, to divorce the woman, under certain circumstances, as in the case of the deaf man, right? Nami lo migarsha. Here too cannot be divorced. Ela ledidcho, but according to you, okay, Rab, who is talking, ma'ishna isha, u'ma'ishna ish. What difference then is it to the woman? What difference is it regarding the man? Amrule. So they said to him, Eino domeh ha'ish hamigaresh li'isha hamitgaresh. There is no comparison between the man who is able to divorce versus the woman who becomes divorced. Okay. He'id Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. Okay. Now, what did he give testimony about? Amar Rava, says Rava, Me eduto shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, regarding the testimony of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. Amar la'edim, he says to the witnesses, Ru'u get zeh she'ani noten. See this get that I am giving. Va'amar la, and he could say to her, okay, Kansi shtar chov zeh. Take this document of obligation, this debt, the debt, money. Harei zo megureshet. Then the witnesses could testify. She is considered, since she accepted the document.
Even though she didn't know it was
Didn't
a
know,
debt.
exactly. Even though she didn't know it was a get, but it was, she thought it was something else. She is considered divorced. Mi lo amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada lo ba'inin da'ata. Are you now saying that Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, in his testimony, is saying that she does not need, that we don't need her acknowledgement, her awareness? Hachanami lo ba'inin da'ata. It would seem here then that we don't need her awareness.
So you could
Okay.
give a get to a
To a chareshet, right? Pshita, that seems obvious. Mahu detema. What then you're trying to tell us? Mida amarle can see shtar chov zeh, batule batle. Maybe when he says, take this check or take this document, he's nullifying the get. Okay? Kamash malan comes to teach us, ita de batle le'edim havika amar laho. If he were actually nullifying the get, he would specifically tell that to the witnesses, right? Right? Umidelo amar le'edim lo batle velo mide. And since he didn't say so to the witnesses, we understand that it is not nullified whatsoever. Vahai de ka'amar hachi, and the fact that he said what he said, mechemat kisufahu de ka'amar laho. Perhaps it was because of embarrassment or a shame that he did not spell it out, that it was a get, that he didn't spell it
You
out.
can see the Gemara is written by.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to stop right there. Okay. I think that's the best place to stop, because as the Gemara then goes on, where we would need to go into another inyan really over then to the next page. Okay.
Everybody gets a half hour off. It's not even 9 o'clock yet.
Yeah, but Gemara clearly says the reason he can't divorce the favorite is he doesn't know he's being divorced. After the man put this step, he doesn't know she's getting a get.
Because afterwards they tell her.
Okay, but
The
not the
requirement
property.
is that she take it,
Right.
okay? So he used the subterfuge to get it into her. Then he says, aha, it's not 100.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Green.